I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 2022. And if you celebrate Chinese New Year, it's the year of the tiger. Tiger is symbolic for having the courage and bravery to drive out any evil from your life. And no, today I'm not talking about hiring a priest to exorcise those creepy voices you keep hearing from the attic in the middle of the night.
I need an old priest and a young priest.
I'm talking about something else that's evil impacting each and every one of us. Inflation. The annual inflation rate for the US in 2021 was 7%. That's the highest since 1982. Home prices between February 2020 and September 2021 increased on average over 20% after adjusting for inflation. And what's worse, average hourly wages only increased by 4.7% in the year prior to that, effectively meaning the average worker in the United States actually took a pay cut of more than 2% in 2021. And with interest rates reduced to zero to stimulate the economy at the onset of the pandemic, the best high yield savings accounts have only been paying 0.5% in interest on your cash. Unfortunately, this means the purchasing power of that cash savings set aside is being diminished by about 6.5% for most goods and services. So, will Jerome Powell be a tiger and have the courage and bravery to raise interest rates high enough to truly bring inflation back down to the target rate of 2% in 2022? I'm not feeling all warm and fuzzy about that inside, guys. Here's why. After months of Jay Powell proclaiming that inflation is transitory and will naturally subside on its own, he recently completely flipped his script and admitted that inflation has become more entrenched in the US economy.
There's a real risk now, I believe, that inflation may be more persistent, and that may be putting inflation expectations under pressure, and that the risk of higher inflation becoming entrenched has increased.
Despite this, the Federal Reserve is continuing its bond purchasing program it initiated early on in the pandemic to support the economy through at least March of this year. They're essentially shoveling coal into an overheated furnace at this point and burning all of us in the process. The other big tool the Federal Reserve has to fight inflation is to raise interest rates. But interest rates would need to rise so dramatically in order to truly win this war against inflation, and I don't see how Jerome Powell can do that. Here's the pickle he's in.
This is hard. I am in a pickle.
The US government spends money like a kid in a candy store. Since the financial crisis of 2008, US debt has grown at a rate faster than GDP. And instead of doing the responsible thing and cutting off spending when it gets truly out of control, Congress does the exact opposite of that and raises the debt ceiling so the US government can continue to spend.
This is making insanely good sense to me.
The US national debt is now at an all-time high of over $30 trillion. That's trillion with a T. Annual tax revenues from the federal government only total around $4 trillion. You don't need to know calculus to understand that the federal government is operating at a huge deficit. And if Jay Powell raises rates too high too soon, he puts the US government at risk of defaulting on that debt. This would create a dollar crisis of epic proportions and spiral the US economy into a serious recession. Fun fact, the US government hasn't defaulted on its debt since the War of 1812, when parts of the Treasury in Washington, D.C. got burned. So that begs the question, what should you be doing with your money to offset the effects of this inflation that I suspect we will continue to experience in 2022? One of the best performing assets during times of high inflation are stocks. So be sure to take full advantage to the extent you can of tax-friendly investment accounts like 401ks, IRAs, and HSAs. It's also important during times of economic uncertainty to maintain an emergency fund. If you're a single income household and have a stable job, it's a good idea to have about 6 to 12 months of expenses saved up. If you're a dual income household, you can get away with a leaner emergency fund of 3 to 6 months. It's best to keep the bulk of that fund in an FDIC insured account so it's liquid and safe and accessible when you need it. This can be accomplished by keeping your emergency fund in a high yield savings account like Ally Bank or Yada Savings. But as already established earlier in the video, the interest paid on these accounts is nowhere close to keeping up with inflation. So if you wish to allocate some or all of your emergency funds somewhere else to earn a higher yield, there's a couple options. First up is I-bonds, which are paying 7.12% interest right now. I-bonds are issued by the US Treasury and have historically been one of the safest assets. The bond has a 30-year maturity, but can be redeemed after 1 year with a penalty of 3 months of interest, or after 5 years with no penalty at all. It's best to think of an I-bond like a 1-year CD because your money's locked up for at least 1 year, so make sure you still have enough cash set aside to float an unexpected expense in those next 12 months. There are 2 interest rates associated with I-bonds: a fixed rate, which does not change for the duration you hold the bond, and an inflation rate, which is variable and changes every 6 months. The inflation rate is announced in May and November of each year. The fixed rate is currently 0%, but the inflation rate is 7.12% through May of this year. And since I don't see inflation coming down substantially anytime soon, I expect this inflation rate to remain high throughout the second half of the year. You can purchase up to $10,000 of I-bonds each year, or $20,000 if you have a spouse as well. There are many advantages to I-bonds as well as ways to exceed that $10,000 annual individual limit, which I won't go into in this video, but I'll leave a link in the description below to a free and quick crash course on I-bonds for anyone interested in learning more. Now, I know I-bonds aren't very sexy, so let's spice things up a little bit. A second strategy to earn more yield on your cash is through holding stable coins. A stablecoin is a digital currency pegged to the US dollar, and so its value does not fluctuate in the way other speculative cryptocurrencies do. You can link your bank to a crypto exchange like DimeFi and deposit cash, which automatically converts to a stablecoin called USDC, earning you a whopping 12% interest. Similar to what traditional banks do with that cash you have deposited, these crypto exchanges lend out USDC to other institutional and retail investors who trade cryptos like Bitcoin and Ethereum. But of course, with higher returns comes higher risk. So it's not a good idea to deposit any amount that would be devastating for you to potentially lose. Let's talk about that risk for a moment. If the exchange experiences defaulting on its loans, you may not be able to recoup your dollars on deposit. The other big risk is related to security. Crypto is like the wild, wild west right now. There's a lack of clear regulation to protect investors like me and you, and hackers have been known to steal coins from time to time.
Great, we can just put that into your retirement account and make it go to work for you, and it's gone.
Because USDC, or any cryptocurrency for that matter, is not FDIC insured, there's no guarantee that you would be returned your money if one of these events happened, and no one can accurately forecast how likely any of them will happen. So if you have the risk tolerance to invest some of your cash with stablecoins for that high yield, you can mitigate these concerns by not keeping all your eggs in one basket. Consider opening accounts with more than one crypto exchange than DimeFi, such as Voyager, Gemini, or BlockFi, and spread out your cash among these accounts. Keep in mind that the interest rate paid on stablecoins is variable and is subject to change from time to time. If you've made it this far in the video, please like and subscribe to support the channel. And if you like free stuff like me, check out the description below where I'll include links to sign-up bonuses to some of the accounts I mentioned in this video, as well as a link to my Millionaire Mentality ebook so you can learn to grow your financial IQ, grow your wealth, and reduce your stress. See you next time.